about a year ago, or in March 2022, I reached out to you that I had the idea to compile a book about your writings and talks of Ula Dunapadu, 40 Verses on What Is. And I wanted to ask your permission if you agreed if I would use your text and your talks for compiling that book.
Yeah.
And of course, also your translations, especially.
Yes.
And you said that was a very good idea. So I started doing that. And it resulted that finally this book has been published this week, which is called Ramana Maharshi's 40 Verses on What Is and the Ultimate Truth on Being as You Actually Are. And one of the very great things is that you also were willing to write an introduction for this book.
Right.
And that introduction in itself is already really awesome to read. It's kind of a summary of Bhagavan's teaching. So I'm very, very happy with that, and also very grateful that you were willing to do that. Let me just say it right away. For everyone who is interested in this book, there is a free sample available. That sample is about a quarter of the book in itself, and it will be made available through the description under this YouTube video. And that sample includes your introduction, which is really, really awesome to read in itself. And it also has 4 verses. And I put it on the back cover because you said it in your introduction. This work shines as the core and crest jewel of Ramana Maharshi's Bhagavan's teachings, being the quintessence of all of them. Could you still shortly again tell why people should read this work of Bhagavan, but also because there are many translations out there. I've seen a lot of them because I gathered them before I started with compiling this book, and I saw all kind of differences in the translations.
Yes.
Could you also explain why it's so important to read the work, the translations and explanations that you are doing about it?
Okay. Firstly, why Ula Dunapadu is such an important work, because many of the fundamental principles of Bhagavan's teachings are expounded by him very, very clearly in Ula Dunapadu. So if we understand Ula Dunapadu, that will help us greatly to understand other works of Bhagavan. Likewise, understanding other works will also help us to understand Ula Dunapadu. That we can't take any work of Bhagavan in isolation. We can't take, if we take one verse of Ula Dunapadu, we cannot understand it fully without understanding it in the context of all the other verses of Ula Dunapadu. Likewise, we cannot understand Ula Dunapadu without understanding it in the broader context of all of Bhagavan's original writings. But among all of Bhagavan's original writings, it is very special in the focus that he puts on the fundamental principles. Many of the fundamental principles of his teaching are stated or implied more clearly in Ula Dunapadu than anywhere else. So it is an extremely important work where nobody can claim to have understood Bhagavan correctly if they haven't merely reading Ula Dunapadu isn't sufficient. We need to read it and reread it and think very deeply about it. And most important, we need to apply it in practice. Regarding the translation, there are many translations of Ula Dunapadu and other works of Bhagavan by people who really didn't understand what Bhagavan is talking about. That is one of the principal ideas that's running through so many of verses of Ula Dunapadu is that ego is the base of everything. But many people, where Bhagavan is referring to ego, they say, they take it as referring to our real nature. For example, earlier I was talking about verse 9, when he said that dyads and triads always cling to one thing. Many translations take that one thing to be our real self, our real nature, what we actually are. That's missing the point. And so many other places where Bhagavan is actually referring to our real nature, people take it, they misinterpret it. the previous verse, verse 8, there's a classic misinterpretation. Bhagavan says in the first sentence of verse 8, in that verse, he doesn't use the word God, he uses the word porol. Porol means substance. In the previous verse, he had defined what he means by substance. Only that which exists without appearing and disappearing, as the base for the appearing and disappearing of the mind and world, is porol. That is the pundram, that is the whole. So by porol, he means the ultimate substance, the one thing that actually really exists. Then in verse 8, he says, whoever worships in whatever form, giving whatever name, that is the means to see that porol in name and form. What he uses, the term he uses for name or in name and form is per uru vil. Il is a locative case ending. So the simple meaning for that, he's in the first sentence, he talks about seeing in name and form. In the second sentence, he talks about seeing in truth. In other words, seeing it as it actually is. So in both cases, he says, he uses the locative case ending. Unmeil, in truth, per uru vil, in name and form. However, il can also be taken as an abbreviation of two other words. It can be taken as an abbreviation of illada. Illada means without. So it could be taken to mean of that reality which is without name and form. In other words, that nameless and formless reality. But if he's talking about seeing that nameless and formless reality, what is the point of that? I mean, why does it? Yes, we know when reality is nameless and formless. That's clearly implied in the previous verse. But here he's talking about the seeing. So he's talking about seeing that nameless. Of course, we all accept that substance, that reality is nameless and formless. But he's talking about seeing it. What he means is seeing it in name and form. Il can also mean, instead of illada means which is without name and form. That is, per uru illada means without name and form, or nameless and formless. It can also be, and il can also be an abbreviation of illadu. Illadu would mean without name and form, seeing it without name and form. Some people have translated it as that. Worshipping that supreme reality, that ultimate reality, he doesn't even say supreme reality, that reality in name and form is the way to see it without name and form. Some people have taken it. But that's clearly not what he means, because the very next sentence he says, ayinum. A word ayinum means however. So there's a contrast between the first sentence and the second sentence. In the second sentence, he says, knowing one's own reality and thereby subsiding in the reality of that substance alone is seeing in truth. So if that alone is seeing in truth, then obviously what he's talking about in the first sentence is he's contrasting it with what he's talking in the first sentence. So anyone who has a deep understanding will understand what he's talking about in the first sentence. Worshipping in name and form, giving it whatever, that you're worshipping in any form, giving it whatever name, is a way to see it in name and form. If you worship God as Krishna, in the form of a blue boy playing a flute, and you give it the name Krishna, and you worship in that form, that is the way to see God in that form. But that's not really seeing him. If you know your own reality, and thereby you subside in the reality of that one thing, that is the seeing in truth. But people have misunderstood that. Even in the second sentence, people have misunderstood it, because in a Tamil verse, words don't always follow the natural prose order. Even in English verses, sometimes the words will not be expressed as you would normally express it in prose. The sentence will be a bit jumbled up, but you can still understand what it means. So in Tamil verses, often the words are not said in the normal prose order. So sometimes, in order to get the correct meaning, it's not only necessary to split the verse into words, because the words are all fused together according to rules of Sandhi, that is euphonic conjunction, and then they're divided according to the metrical feet. So half of one word may be in one metrical foot, the other half may be in another metrical foot. So you first have to split the verse into words. That's called padachetam. Then, for many verses, you also have to do what is called anvayam. Anvayam is making it into the natural prose order. If you don't do that, you can sometimes arrive at the wrong meaning. So in this second sentence, many people have translated it according to the order of words in the verse, knowing one's own reality in the reality of that real thing, and subsiding is knowing in truth. What does it mean, knowing one's own reality in the reality of that thing? It makes it sound like there are two things. That is missing the point. Knowing one's own reality and subsiding in the reality of that real thing. Because one's own reality is the reality of that real thing. So by knowing one's own reality, one thereby subsides in that. So there are so many subtleties there, but require proper understanding.